Welcome to the Unit 1 Topic Number 5 Review and Answer Key. Topic number 5 is going to focus on graphing and data analysis. If you need any additional information that goes into more detail, you can refer to daysheets 13 through 16 that we've already done as a class. Let's go ahead and dive in and see what we need to do for our first section. The first section is asking us to label the graph below using the following terms. So I notice that I have x-axis, y-axis, independent variable, dependent variable, the word horizontal, vertical, title, as well as origin. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to start off by using the words horizontal and vertical. So the word horizontal, we talked about this in class. Horizontal means that it's running the same way that the horizon does. So if we think about the horizon and horizontal have the same going from left to right orientation. So if I'm looking down here, this is what I'm seeing. So this is going to be my horizontal axis. For vertical, vertical is talking about going up and down. So I know that my vertical axis is going to be this one right here. So I'm going to go ahead and label that as well. So I have horizontal done and vertical is also done. Now I'm going to jump up and look at my x and my y axis. To help me remember, I'm going to start with the y axis, and I'm going to remember that we said in class y to the sky. So the y axis is always pointing up. So this is going to be my y axis. I'm going to label it. And then I'm going to put a check mark next to it so that I know that I did it. And obviously that means that this is going to be my x-axis because it's the only thing left. So my x-axis is going to be horizontal, my y-axis is going to be vertical. The next thing I'm going to do is figure out where my IV and my DV go. Remember, your independent variable can also be written as an IV. Your dependent variable can be written as a DV. I'm going to draw a picture, the same picture that we drew in class, to help us remember where our IV and our DV goes. So this is my X and my Y axis. I'm going to turn my X axis into a capital I to help me remember that my IV goes on the X, and turn my Y axis to a capital letter D to help me remember that my DV goes on the Y. I also can do this if it helps me. Looking at my x-axis, I can turn my x into two capital I's that are crossing one another to help me remember that my IV always goes on my x. So that means that this is going to be my IV on the bottom on my horizontal axis, and my DV is going to be on my vertical or my y-axis. So my IV and my DV are done. I now need to figure out what I need to do with my title. Remember that my title always goes at the top, and it should display the relationship between the y and the x-axis. And again, this should be the very first thing that you should look at when you're looking at a graph. Finally, the last thing I need to do is my origin, and my origin is the point where my x and my y-axis actually meet. So this is going to be my origin. Now that I have all of my parts of my graph labeled and I understand where things are supposed to go, I can go ahead and dive in and see whether or not I can answer the following question. For the next section, I have an experiment with some data. It says, a clam farmer has been keeping records concerning the water temperature and the number of clams developed from fertilized eggs. The data is recorded below. So notice that on my left-hand side, I have water temperature in Celsius, and on my right-hand side, I have my number of developing clams. Now, just like in our notes, we told you that the IV is typically going to be found on the left-hand side, and the DV is typically going to be found on the right-hand side, and that's still the case for my data chart. So when I look at number 1, it's asking what is the dependent variable. The dependent variable is what I'm measuring. So I'm going to go ahead and remind myself of that again. So it's what we're measuring or collecting data on. And I know that this is going to be number of developing clams, because I've already isolated it here in my data table. For number 2, I'm asking what is my independent variable. My independent variable is what I change. So if I'm the clam farmer, I'm changing the water temperature. So water temperature is going to be my IV. For number 3, it's asking me to actually go ahead and graph this data. So in order to graph this data, I have to turn to the next page. And when I look at the next page, I actually have some graphing paper. So I'm going to zoom out so that I can look at my graphing paper as a whole. And here it is. I'm going to go ahead and create my IV and my DV, my x-axis and my y-axis. So here I go. I'm going to go ahead and put my y-axis in. I'm going to go straight down. And I'm going to put my x-axis in and go straight over. So this is going to be my X, this is going to be my Y. I have my X and my Y identified. I'm going to go back up to my data chart and look at what my numerical values actually are. So I have my IB and my DB. I need to ask myself, what type of title should I actually give my graph? So again, my title should show me the relationship between water temperature and the number of developing clams. So what I could do is say the effect of water temperature on clam or on clams or number of clams or number of developing clams. Any of those things would work. So I have my title in. The next thing that I have to do is figure out what's going to go on my X and what's going to go on my Y. But remember, my answers to 1 and 2 have already helped me figure that out. So I know that my dependent variable is going to be the number of developing clams, and that's going to go on my Y-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and write that here. So this is going to be number of developing clams is going to go on my Y-axis. And looking down at my bottom is going to be my IV, so this is going to be water temperature. And I'm going to put this in degrees Celsius is going to be my unit. So I've already done my title. I've labeled both my X and my Y axis. The next thing I need to do is scale the graph. So I have to figure out how am I actually going to scale my graph. Well, before I do that, I need to ask myself, am I making a bar graph or am I making a line graph? And remember, whenever we talk about a bar graph versus a line graph, really quickly, let me zoom in so we can write this information down. If we're talking about a bar graph, a bar is going to be non-continuous data. A line graph, remember, is going to be continuous. It's showing us data over time. Well, if we're looking at this data, notice we have water temperature that's changing, and we want to see how that change causes a change in the number of developing clams. So we're actually looking at continuous data, even though this is not saying time, even though it's going to be water temperature. So I know that I'm going to be making a line graph when I'm actually looking at the graph that I'm going to create. So the next thing I need to do is figure out how I'm going to scale. So I'm going to scale my water temperature first. So I notice that I'm going from 15 is the lowest water temperature that I actually have to have data for, and 50 is going to be the highest. So if I go down, I'm going to go ahead and scale this. I'm going to start here with 0. And I'm going to zoom in so that you guys can see what I'm doing here. And then I think I'm just going to go by tens. So this is going to be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And I know that 50 is my highest number, but I'm going to keep going to give myself some space. Okay, so I have 10 through 60 on the side. And then going back up, looking at how I need to scale my number of developing clams, my smallest number is going to be 0, and my highest number is going to be 140. So again, I'm going to start out with 0 here on my origin, and I need to figure out how I'm going to scale. And again, I think that I'm just going to scale by tens. So 10, 20, and then I'm just going to keep going. 30, 40, 50. And it's okay if you didn't scale it exactly like my graph, because that's the great thing about graphs. They can be scaled in lots of different ways depending on how significant you want the data to look. So there's no right or wrong way to scale a graph. And that's important to know when you're actually making your graph for your test, because remember, on your test, you're going to receive a similar question to the one that I'm asking you to deal with right now. So I'm going to go up to 150. So I'm officially scaled. I'm going to zoom out so I can see my entire graph, and I'm going to go up and look at my first data point. So at 15 degrees, I have 75 developing clams. So I'm going to go down. Here's 15 right here, and I'm going to go all the way up till I get to 75. Here's 70, I'm going to go one more. So here's my first data point. So 15 degrees, 75 clams. I'm going to go back up at 20, I have 90. So I'm going to go back down at 20 degrees. I'm going to go all the way up till I get to 90. And here we go. So here's my next data point. I'm going to go back up to my data chart. At 25 degrees, I have 120. So here's 25. I'm going to go up until I have 120. And here we go. And then next data point is at 30 degrees, I have 140. So at 30 degrees, I'm going to go up till I get to 140 on my graph. Here we go on my y-axis. I'm going to keep going. At 35, I have 75. So 35, I'm going to go up till I get to 75. Whoops, I've gone way past it. So at 35, I have 75. So here we go. I'm going to go back up looking at 40. At 40 degrees, I have 40 clams. So I'm going to go up till I get to 40. We're almost done. At 45, I have 15 clams. So at 45 degrees, I have 15. And then our last data point that we need is 50. And at 50 degrees Celsius, we have 0 clams. Now, I'm not quite done yet because I actually have to go in. Now that I've done this, I actually have to go in and connect the data points. So here we go. I'm starting at 15 degrees. At 15 degrees, we go from 75 to 90. So I'm going to draw my line and connect those dots. Then from 20 degrees to 25, we're going from 90 degrees or 90 clams to 120. So I'm going to draw my line again. And again, you guys would be using a ruler. And then I'm going to connect my next set of dots. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going still. I'm connecting my next set of dots right here. And your line will obviously be much nicer than mine. Then I'm going to connect my next set of dots. Keep going. Try to make it nice and dark so you guys can see it. And keep going. And then finally, my last data points that I need to collect. So looking at my graph overall, it has a very interesting shape. Notice that we're trending up, 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 and then we get to a peak, and then we go straight back down. So now that I have my graph, I can actually use the graph that I just created to answer questions 4 and 5. Number 4 asks, what is the optimal water temperature for developing clams? Now this is a key term that you need to know. The word optimal means best. You're going to see it many, many times this year, so make sure you know it. So in order to figure out what's the best water temperature to grow my clams in, I'm looking at my chart. Looking at my chart, I see that I peak right here. So this right here is my optimal data point. So I'm going to go down, see what it aligns with. And it aligns with 30 degrees. So I'm going to go back up and I'm going to write 30 degrees Celsius. I hope that you've already done that and your answers were correct. And lastly, number 5, how does the data trend after 30 degrees Celsius? So to figure that out, here's 30 degrees. I'm going to go up. How does it trend from this point forward? Well, we know that there's a steep decline. So we can say that. Or you can just say that it declines, or you can say that it is falling. That also works. Or you can just say falls. All right, again, if you need any more help, more specifics focusing on graphing, you can refer to day sheets 13 through 16, or you can go to BioMonster Cinema, and there are actually 3 videos that can help you with graphing. The first one is our basic introduction to graphing, and where the IV and the DV goes, and where to find them on a data chart, and how to actually graph data. Our second set of videos are mini tutorials that we came up with to get you ready for your graphing quiz. So be sure to check out all 3 of those videos if you need additional help. And also, please refer to your previous day sheets. Thanks so much, guys, and good luck studying.